Hello, everyone. Welcome to this paper on cross-border student mobilities in contemporary China. I'm Dr. Cora Lingling Xu. I'm an assistant professor at Durham University in the UK. You can follow me on Twitter via @Cora Lingling Xu or at mobilities, which is the network for research mobilities that I'm directing. I'm really glad to have this opportunity to share this aspect of my student. As you know, my research concerns with education mobilities across and beyond China. And in this paper, I'm going to focus particularly on the cross-border student mobilities aspect of my research. And in order to do so, I'm going to draw on a few different data sources. The first one is a typology paper that I published in 2019 in Review of Education, which was a thematic, systematic narrative review of around 250 articles, university websites, and government documents about the different types of higher education mobilities. So this is the first source of data. The second source of data is from my longitudinal research about the bi-directional student mobilities between mainland China and Hong Kong. And you can find my various publications from 2015 to 2020 about these two different research projects. So the first research project was about 31 students who were from mainland China and had pursued undergraduate studies at the Hong Kong University. I interviewed them multiple times over the years from 2013 to 2019. The second project included 23 Hong Kong students who pursued their undergraduate studies in about 11 mainland Chinese universities. Most of these universities were located in Beijing, with one located in Nanjing. And these students, I first interviewed them in 2016, and for some of them, I continue to interact with them across the years, and which stopped in 2019. So I will argue that these data are longitudinal data, and they are able to give us some very intriguing insights into the experiences of these students who cross borders to pursue higher education, especially undergraduate education. Right. So here is the typology of contemporary Chinese higher education mobilities, which I published in 2019 in the Review of Education. Here you can see that on the horizontal axis, I included the directions in terms of education mobilities. So it included the home direction, and then the abroad one. So in terms of home, it refers to the within country sort of education mobilities, and in terms of abroad, it refers to the outbound education mobilities or inbound education mobilities in relation to China, of course. And on the vertical axis, you can see three different types of agents, including students, academics, and institutions. So with regard to student mobilities, in the home dimension, we can see there are different forms of student mobilities from China's west to China's east. Okay, for the benefit of those colleagues who do not know about the regional differences, China's western areas are much less developed economically, and where China's eastern regions are more developed. And then also about ethnic minority student mobilities. The second aspect of student mobility in the within country dimension is about rural to urban student mobility, which we will not discuss today. And the third one is the bi-directional flows between students from mainland China and Hong Kong and Macau. Okay, and this is because of the special status of Hong Kong and Macau, which I will elaborate later. Yeah, so in fact, today my paper will be focusing on the third type of student mobilities within China, hence the cross-border student mobility title. As for the outbound and inbound student mobilities, Chinese students who have been going to study abroad, and they have been researched extensively. And in more recent years, there are quite a lot more international students who come to China to either pursue language studies or to seek degrees, to pursue their degrees, etc., etc. So I'm not going to get into depth to the other types, but if you're interested, I would strongly encourage you to read the paper and to explore the other types of education mobilities in contemporary Chinese higher education today. Right, in this paper, I would like to put forth two main arguments. The first one is that education inequalities are embedded through the interactions between overt and state-instituted mechanisms, such as residence permit and student identity cards, or indeed, the Hong Kong ID card, right? And covert structural mechanisms such as stereotypes, hiring practices, institutional biases, etc. And the second argument that I will put forth is that such interactions exercise symbolic violence. And here I'm borrowing from Pierre Bourdieu's notion of symbolic violence here. So I argue that such interactions between the overt state-instituted mechanisms and the covert structural mechanisms like stereotypes, etc., this kind of interaction exercise symbolic violence on these mobile subjects, meaning the cross-border students in political, academic, and ethnic senses. And I will hope to provide some data, some snapshots, that's what I call, to illustrate such kind of symbolic violence later. Right, so in order to contextualize my study, it is pertinent for me to emphasize what I mean by the transborder context between Hong Kong and mainland China. For those of you who have paid attention to Hong Kong in recent years, Hong Kong has been hitting news headlines quite a lot, not least because of the Occupy Central movement that erupted in 2014, and then the anti-extradition law movements, protests that erupted in 2019. Since, in fact, from Hong Kong's sovereignty return to China in 1997, Hong Kong has been in a very special has been occupying a very special kind of political, economic, ideological position in relation to mainland China. And here in my papers that I published in 2017, 2018, I argue that the context between mainland China and Hong Kong is a transborder context, because the spaces in Hong Kong and the spaces in mainland China, they belong politically to the same country, and they share a deep level of historic, cultural, and or ethnic entanglement, but they can be so divergent, ideologically, linguistically, and socially. And here I would like to proffer an example in terms of the higher education admission policies to show you the contrast between the two contexts. And here I'm drawing on Project 1 and Project 2. Project 1, if you still recall, is about mainland Chinese students who have crossed the border to study in Hong Kong's universities. And Project 2 is the other direction around. It's about Hong Kong students who have studied in mainland China's universities. And here you can see from this quote, this is from one of the students who was from mainland China. He said that the heated social discourse promoted Hong Kong higher education institutions as the best choice for top students like us. In my study, I included 31 such students. Many of them got top marks in their respective cities and even provinces. So they were called 状元, meaning that the most outstanding, literally ranked number 1 in their respective provinces or cities. So they were highly academically capable and inclined, and they were mostly from very middle-class backgrounds in urban areas in China. Or about at least two-thirds of them got admission offers from top universities in mainland China, including Peking University, Tsinghua University, Fudan University, and Zhejiang University. So these were some of the top universities that millions and millions of other mainland Chinese students were competing to enter. And yet these students in my study said no to such prestigious offers, and instead they chose to pursue their studies in Hong Kong. And it was precisely because of the sort of social discourses and because of the portrayal and the packaging of Hong Kong's universities, which appeal greatly to these highly academically inclined and relatively wealthy students from mainland China. In contrast, universities in mainland have much less appeal to students who are from Hong Kong. For instance, in this quote, you can see that this student from Hong Kong, he suggested that the competition is much less keen to enter universities in mainland China when compared with the competition to enter Hong Kong's local universities. And in fact, mainland China and mainland Chinese universities have offer this kind of positive discrimination to attract students from Hong Kong to study in mainland universities. So these students, they said, we can enter the same prestigious universities with 100 fewer points than the mainland Chinese students from mainland China, of course. And similarly, these students get scholarships, they get lower tuition fees, because the tuition fees in Hong Kong are much higher than the tuition fees that they would pay in mainland China. They get better accommodation conditions than their counterparts from mainland China. So they enjoy a host of advantages of preferential treatments when they decided to go to mainland China. And this is partly because of the relatively lower ranking of many of mainland Chinese universities in international league tables, and also because of this kind of perceived inferiority among students in Hong Kong of mainland China's universities. And here, I would like to offer the first snapshot of the kind of student mobility experiences that some of my participants have experienced. So here, this one is about an incident or two incidents that happened to the same student with the pseudonym of Ling Shan. So Ling Shan was from mainland China. She was, at the time when I interviewed her in 2013, she was a first-year undergraduate student majoring in social sciences. And she was noting to me that when she was crossing the border, and here we're talking about the state-instituted sort of mechanisms, the border between Hong Kong and mainland China is a very peculiar sort of construction, to distinguish the two different spaces. So she was pointing to the different channels of entry into Hong Kong designated for the mainland residents and for the Hong Kong residents. Because at the time she was a university student in Hong Kong, although she was originally from mainland China, she was given a Hong Kong ID card. And this ID card played a significant role in her navigation of this cross-border movement. She said, it felt quite convenient to take the Hong Kong resident channel, because mainland visitors had to queue in long queues. And in contrast, when I walked past them as a Hong Kong resident, much quicker, much more swiftly, I felt like this ID card had given me lots of convenience, and it made me feel like a Hong Konger. In other words, during that brief moment, Ling Shan had this instantaneous sense of being accorded a higher kind of social status. And this convenience was brought along by the Hong Kong ID card. Right. Now, interestingly, another incident happened about a year later when I interviewed her again. This time, she was depicting something that she witnessed when she was trying to get back to mainland China for the Chinese New Year celebration and holiday. She said, when we were passing through the border, again, this happened in the border, we all had to place our luggage on the bus. There was this possibly, she wasn't sure, okay, there was this possibly mainlander whose luggage blocked the way of the next passenger, a female Hong Konger. This woman complained, how come you mainlanders 素质, meaning quality, 素质 is also a term to depict quality or demeanor, yeah, or cultivation, comportment, etc. 素质. She asked, how come you mainlanders 素质 quality is so poor? That male mainlander started to defend himself in Cantonese. And note here the language issue as well. I'm not a mainlander, I'm a Hong Konger. The woman replied disdainfully, then show me your ID card. She repeatedly demanded this, but the man did not show any such evidence in the end. Seeing this, I was really sad. Here we can see there's a host of issues, there's a host of factors at play in this brief encounter that Lingling witnessed. First of all, the issue of language, right? You have to speak, in Hong Kong, the official languages are Cantonese and English, whereas in mainland China, the common language is Putonghua, Mandarin, as some of my colleagues may refer to. Therefore, here the language issue, but is that this supposedly mainlander person had to defend himself in Cantonese to trying to argue that he is a real Hong Konger. But the interesting thing about Hong Kong is that if you speak Cantonese in an accented way, meaning that people can almost instantaneously tell whether you are local Hong Kongers or you are not from the locally born and bred kind of Hong Kongers, just by telling your accent when you speak Cantonese. So here Lingling was not revealing the accent, probably because Lingling herself was not very familiar with Cantonese accents anyway. But here you can see also that this female Hong Konger was placing a lot of symbolic meaning or importance or superiority to the Hong Kong ID card. If you have a Hong Kong ID card, it is as if you then necessarily have a higher level of 素质, of quality. Yeah, so this way it seems that they are transferring a kind of symbolic meaning to the ID card. Right, and this man was not able to present such a form of evidence to testify or to prove his own authenticity as a mainlander. And at the same time, this accusation about mainlanders having lower 素质 seemed to be accepted by both parties. The man did not really try to defend the idea that not all mainlanders have low 素质. Yeah, he did not do that, but instead he was very eager to prove that he was from Hong Kong, and hence he could be exempted from this kind of accusation or this kind of relegation of his relatively poor 素质, poor quality or poor demeanor or poor comportment or poor ways of behaving. Yeah, so seeing this, Lingling was very sad. And here I will argue that, here this sort of state-instituted mechanisms such as the borders, but also such as the ID cards, seem to create a form of symbolic, or to be exercising a form of symbolic violence upon, these, even Lingling herself, but also these supposedly mainlander, this male mainlander, because there's this imagined sort of hierarchy about the 素质, the quality of different possessors of ID cards. Yeah, and here the Hong Konger identity therefore could be argued to be imbued with a deep level of uncertainty on Lingling's part. In the first incident, in the first quote, she felt as if she was a real Hong Konger, but in the second incident, she felt very insecure, very uncertain, and uneasy indeed about her Hong Konger identity. And this really is, in my view, shows a very intricate and nuanced example of the complexities of the Hong Kong mainland sort of dynamics and identity construction issues. The second snapshot is from a student from another from the second project. Meaning that this is Vivian. At the time when I interviewed her, she was 21 years old, doing philosophy in a very prestigious university in Beijing. So she, in Beijing, there is this Hong Kong organization called Beijing Office of the Hong Kong Government, 驻京办, which is sort of a diasporic organization representing Hong Kong that is stationed in Beijing to help Hong Kongers, Hong Kong business people, Hong Kong students, any Hong Kong residents, who were conducting their businesses in Beijing or studying in Beijing or doing anything in Beijing. Yeah. So this Beijing office of the Hong Kong government often organized social gatherings and functions for Hong Kong residents. In other words, so long as you are from Hong Kong, you would get such opportunities to be invited to join such functions and activities and gatherings, and you would then therefore get a chance to mingle with some of the top Hong Kong government officials and also Hong Kong's business elites who were based in Beijing or who were conducting their businesses in Beijing. Yeah, and because of these opportunities, Vivian was able to make contact with a top-rank official from Hong Kong's immigration office during one of such gatherings. Now, bear in mind that a lot of my participants from Hong Kong who were studying in Beijing or Nanjing, they were from relatively disadvantaged social backgrounds. Their families were from very typical working class backgrounds, and they did not really do very well in their secondary education, and hence they capitalized on the preferential treatments, right, proffered by the Mainland Chinese universities to attract them to study in Mainland China. So this is the background. Now, one day, Vivian realized that she lost her mainland travel permit for Hong Kong residents. So again, parallel to the Hong Kong ID card, this is another state-instituted form of mechanism to mark their distinctive identity as Hong Kongers. So in other words, as Hong Kongers, in order to stay legally in Mainland China or to travel back and forth across the border, she needed this permit, which is called 回乡证 or 回乡证 in Cantonese. So the mainland travel permit for Hong Kong residents. So she lost it. She did not realize it until 1 week before she was due to return to Hong Kong to attend her mom's birthday, for instance. So at that time, her air ticket could not be changed. And it would normally take 2 to 3 weeks to get a temporary travel permit, and there was just not enough time for her because she had to fly in a week's time. So at such a juncture, she remembered that some time ago she actually made contact. She had the contact of this high-rank official from the Hong Kong's immigration office, and so she asked this person for help. And in the end, this person recommended some personnel in the immigration office to her, and so she could ask about how she could use the emergency channels and the kinds of documents required for such purposes. Eventually, she was able to return to Hong Kong fairly quickly. Now, I'll argue that these incidents reveal that the space in Beijing, especially as facilitated or enabled by the Beijing Office of Hong Kong Government, created this very peculiar and special kind of diasporic space for students like Vivian. Okay, Vivian is herself from quite a disadvantaged background in Hong Kong. Had she stayed in Hong Kong, it would be very hard to imagine that she would have such access to make contact or even make friends with top government officials from the Hong Kong's immigration office. However, this diasporic space in Beijing, as facilitated by the Beijing office of the Hong Kong government, created such social occasions where she could expand her social connections, her social networks, and make really high-end sort of social connections, develop her social capital, and in such a way, she was able to then navigate the state-instituted border regime between mainland China and Hong Kong in these incidents where she had to get such expertise, insider information from this Hong Kong Immigration Office top rank official. Yeah, so here it's a perfect example that shows how this kind of overt state instituted mechanism, such as the mainland travel permit for Hong Kong residents, and the covert kind of assumptions and implications about social connections, about their identities as Hong Kongers navigating the two spaces across the border, how these two forms of mechanisms interact in this case in Vivian's navigation. The third snapshot that I want to share is about something called military training. So again, this is from an example of a student from the second project. So Honesty was at the time when I interviewed her. She's from Hong Kong. She was 27 years old when I interviewed her in 2016. She was a law major student, and she revealed that when she joined this university in Beijing, she joined the military training. Now remember that military training is very harsh. It's very harsh. It is compulsory for all students from mainland China. But Hong Kong students are exempted from this because of the special status of Hong Kong students in mainland China. So they were exempted. But interestingly, Honesty, with her very benign or very eager intention to know more about her mainland counterparts and peers, she volunteered to join the military training. And she said that, I was interviewed and accorded the title of a model soldier, Biao Bing, okay? This title apparently was quite well recognized and quite an important form of symbolic recognition, yeah? However, I was in fact quite weak. So she was not like very, very strong. Her performance was not very strong in the military training. And she said, so I was not sure how I got that title. Then it was revealed that it was because I voluntarily joined the military training. Some students, her peers from mainland China, some students began to ask why Hong Kongers should have such privilege when it is compulsory for them. I truly wanted to integrate, but instead other people conceived of me as making use of my privilege to gain public recognition. I felt a bit uncomfortable deep down. So here you can see that from the university's point of view, they wanted to use this publicity opportunity to underscore the idea of political unity, political integration between Honesty, who is a Hong Kong citizen, and the mainland sort of establishment, and therefore they accorded her this title. And this could be argued, in fact in my paper I did argue that this is in fact a sort of a contract, which Honesty unwittingly subscribed to when she took up this preferential treatment proffered by the mainland university to study in mainland China, that they would also become some sort of a political token to underscore political unity and political integration between Hong Kong and mainland China. She was not aware of that, apparently, but in actuality, this was what happened. However, from her mainland Chinese peers' point of view, she was privileged. She was given a title that she probably did not deserve. Yeah. So in this case, it was again a very intriguing instance of how the in this case it's not overt, it's the covert form of mechanism to underscore, to use Honesty's Hong Konger identity to underscore political unity and integration. This kind of intention sort of exercised kind of force on her, which she was not really aware of. So she felt that she was wronged. She was wronged by, first of all, the institution's attempt to give her a title that she was not even feeling that she deserved, or she did not even care about. And on the other hand, she felt that she was wronged by her mainland counterparts, peers, who were jealous of her, who were accusing her of making or capitalizing on her privilege to gain public recognition. Now, the fourth and the final snapshot in this paper today is I want to talk about ethnic identities. So as we know, in mainland China, there are 56 officially recognized ethnic groups, including the Han majority, which accounts for more than 98% of China's 1.4 billion population. There are also 55 so-called ethnic minority groups that have been officially recognized by the Chinese government. And Guoxiang is from one such group called Mongolian. So Guoxiang is originally from Inner Mongolia. She revealed that before she came out of Inner Mongolia to attend university, she was never aware of her own ethnic identity because everybody there was more or less from the same ethnic background. However, when she went to Beijing to pursue the preparatory year of her undergraduate study before she went to Hong Kong to begin her undergraduate journey, she was encountered with some very strange questions all the time. For instance, they will ask her, do you ride horses? Do you live in a tent, in a Mongolian tent? Do you play archery, or are you good at playing archery? So she felt that people had this very backward and barbarian kind of assumptions about her and her ethnic group, which was very, very problematic and caused her a great deal of unease. Yeah. And so at one point she replied to one of such questions by saying, but we are normal people. And here it really underscores the sort of ethnic hierarchy and the lack of understanding about ethnic minority groups within mainland China's bigger or urban places like Beijing, for instance. And so therefore, when she was in Beijing doing her preparatory undergraduate year, she tried not to reveal her ethnic identity as much as she could, because she felt that this was something that was dragging her back, giving her a bad look, and giving her a very heavy baggage to prevent her from making progress in her studies or in her self-identity construction. However, when she went to Hong Kong, she encountered such an ethnic identity awakening moment. At that time, she was a personal assistant. I mean, this was part of her internship. She was a personal assistant to a very famous ethnic Mongolian writer who was from Taiwan. So this ethnic Mongolian famous writer gave a talk to more than 1,000 people in Hong Kong's exhibition and convention and exhibition center, which is a very hipster place that is very cultured and cultural space in Hong Kong. And if you can give a talk to more than 1,000 people, it means that you are really well recognized and well respected, usually in whichever field that you are working in. So Guoxiang revealed that, I felt that there were many things that I had to always try to leave behind my back, including her ethnic identity, to conceal them because I had no time for them. Now here is such a person who can speak to more than 1,000 people in a place like the Hong Kong Convention and Exhibition Center about Inner Mongolia. And so many people are listening carefully to her in awe. So to her, this was shocking or very pleasantly surprising for her, because she always felt that, her Mongolian ethnic identity was always something that was dragging her back, that was very, very negative about her. And yet here she finds that this person commands such a high level of recognition and distinction. And she was able to, this ethnic Mongolian writer was able to talk about the grassland in Inner Mongolia. And people were really keen to listen to her. So she said, if I was, so she was really triggered by this incident, and in fact she told me that she was crying because this presented her an ethnic future, a possible ethnic future that she was not aware of. She realized that probably in the future, if she is successful enough, she can do similar things as this ethnic Mongolian person, a writer for her ethnic group. However, what was very even more intriguing was that Guoxiang herself, she was already Hanified. Han is the majority ethnic group in China. Guoxiang attended a school that only taught her in Putonghua, which is the official language of China, but not in Mongolian. So she had no or very little Mongolian language skills. She had next to none ideas about her ethnic culture, her ethnic history. She had very little. So she felt really ashamed and sad about this. She said, if I was truly knowledgeable about the Mongolian culture, then I could share it with those who do not know about it, especially when those people ask her, can you play archery? Can you ride horses, right? The problem is that I do not know much about it. I feel so sad and ashamed. I even got 10 bonus marks in my Gaokao and enjoy so much benefit from my ethnic identity, but I have not done much for it. For her ethnic group here, I think here is what she was referring to. So here you can see again an interaction between, for instance, the 10 bonus marks that she got in her Gaokao, which was the very competitive National College entrance examination in mainland China. And so this is a kind of positive discrimination that the Chinese government has proffered to ethnic minority students so that they can be less disadvantaged when they try to enter universities at their very important juncture in life, right? She said, I got 10 bonus marks in my Gaokao because of my ethnic identity, and I have benefited from my ethnic identity, but I have done very little for my ethnic group. So she was feeling very ashamed. And here you can see in the first case we were talking about the imagined hierarchy of ID cards, Hong Kong ID cards, mainland ID cards. And here we're talking about the ethnic hierarchy, where the Han majority is occupying an obvious dominant position, and other ethnic groups such as the Mongolian group is subjugated or is in a very dominated position, and very poorly understood by people who are not from this ethnic group, and even by a person who is from this ethnic group like Guoxiang, who has been Hanified by the Han majority culture and education. So she felt really ashamed for her lack of authenticity about her ethnic background. Yeah, so the covert kind of ethnic hierarchy, and then the education that was proffered or that has been proffered to the ethnic minority students like Guoxiang has been such or have been such that they know very little about their own ethnic background, and they felt that there was very little ethnic futures, at least for her when she was in Beijing. Although in Hong Kong she encountered this ethnic awakening moment because of her internship opportunity. So in this paper, therefore, I want to underline that, from the few snapshots that I have presented, that there are such overt state instituted mechanisms like the within-country border between mainland China and Hong Kong, the different political, cultural, and social systems in the two spaces that they occupy, the ID cards, the hierarchies of the ID cards constructed, and then the travel permits, the contrasting higher education admission criteria. These were all overt state instituted mechanisms, but then these interact with the covert forms of structural mechanisms, like the stereotypes of mainlanders and Hong Kongers. Yeah, in their counterparts' views, they had some stereotypes about 数字, about quality, etc. The contested nature of being a Hong Konger, the identity constructions, the insider knowledge and social connections, etc., etc. So, and then in terms of the ethnic identity of Guoxiang, you can see that there are like the positive discriminations toward ethnic minority students, like these 10 bonus marks in Gaokao, the National College entrance examination, or the unified education system where ethnic students are taught, in Putonghua instead of bilingually. Yeah. So, and this also is related to the covert kind of structural mechanisms, such as stereotypes of ethnic minority groups, like can you play archery, do you live in a tent, kind of stereotypes, and also the uneven economic development among ethnic areas when compared with Han-dominated areas, the geographic and cultural discriminations exercised upon ethnic minorities students and their ethnic peers, and the ethnic hierarchy, which I mentioned. So here I want to underline that, when we are looking at student mobilities, cross-border student mobilities, it's very often not just about students moving across borders, because when they move, they bring with them a host of identities with them, including ethnic identity, including their cultural identity, including their political identity. And then in the course or in the process of moving across borders, they experience such kind of symbolic meanings being imposed on them, such as the ID card, the imagined hierarchy, or the actual hierarchy of ethnic groups. They feel that these kind of forces are exercised upon them, where they often feel that they are at the receiving end of symbolic violence, such as the Hong Kong ID card, or symbolic violence exercised upon both Hong Kong and mainland students for different reasons, like the Hong Kong students unwittingly becoming political tokens, etc. Or for Guoxiang, it's like her loss of ethnic culture. She realized that when she was moving to different places to pursue higher education, she was marginalized, etc., etc. So this is, it's related to my arguments that, these education mobilities in China, especially cross-border student mobilities, are simultaneously impacted by the overt state-instituted mechanisms and the covert structural mechanisms. Yeah, and they often reproduce and exacerbate inequalities. Yeah, and in fact, in my forthcoming book, I would proffer a much more systematic account of how inequalities are manifested, embodied, and lived through by different mobile subjects, including these cross-border student subjects, but also rural academics from China, and Chinese students who move to pursue studies in other parts of the world. So yeah, stay tuned for my forthcoming book. And I would like to take this opportunity to promote our network for research into Chinese education mobilities. You can visit this website to learn more about different types of education mobilities in, across, and beyond China. And you can follow us on Twitter, or consider contributing a piece to our research highlights section to introduce your research to a network of more than 500 scholars from across the world. Thank you very much. And these are the references that I have mentioned in my talk just now. Thank you very much.